Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Avodah Zarah daf Nun Daled. We're going to begin on Nun Gimel Amud Beis by the Mishnah. It says the Masnisim. Avodas kochavim shenichua oivdeha. Let's say you have idols and it was left abandoned. People just left it. Now we have to understand why was it left in that situation, and apparently they have no intention to come back, as Rashi points out. So be'ez shaloi muteris. If it was a time of peace, since they left with their own intention, they could have taken it with them. They decided not to, and therefore it's considered to be batal. However, if it was a time of war, they weren't mavatal. They just were running for their lives, but that doesn't mean they were mavatal, and therefore it remains aser. And then the Mishnah tells us, bimusimois shel malachim. When it comes to the platforms which were made out of stone for kings, hari elu mutaros, we say they're mutter. Now Rashi says that moshivin shel avodas kochavim, that we used to put idols on that platform and people would bow down. So why would it be mutter? So the Mishnah says, "V'nei shemamida noiso b'shas shel malachim oivrim." Says Rashi, "Koimer, the nation tzarich lahamida, it needs to be put there b'shas shel malachim oivrim when they pass by. She'enan muchanais l'moishev avodas kochavim kol shah." It's not something which is really designated for the idols all the time. It's only for that one moment when he comes by. So the Gemara is going to ask, so in that situation, why should it be mutter? Okay, so says the Gemara, I'm a Rabbi Yomi Barab, I'm a Rav. Beis Nimroid, which is, Rashi points as Migdal Shabanu Dor HaFlaga, the actual building in which the tower, during the dispersion, which was used for Avodas Kochavim, the Nimrod Hayamelech Alehem. So Nimrod was actually the king at that time during the Dor HaFlaga. So when it came to the Migdal Bavel, it's keilu like it was left during time of peace. People abandoned it, and therefore the Tower of Bavel is mutar b'hana. Now afagav dechi b'durinhu. Rachmana Kishas Muhammadami, even though when Hashem had dispersed them, it gave the impression as though it was a time of war. It says V'yafetz Hashem Oisam. Nonetheless, Iboy Lim Hadar Hadar. If they wanted to, they could have always come back. But the fact they didn't return, Batul Batala. They obviously considered the tower, they were Mavatala. And then the Mishnah said, so understand, understand the fact that it's there only for a short amount of time, so why should it be mutter? So the kings go a path, it's possible they may even take a different path. Says Rashi, he doesn't care. So it's not even considered to be that for Avodah Zarah, because who says that the king even goes through that path? So Kiyasa Oila Yosef Abisma. However, Abimsa. However, when he does come, they will place the Avodah Zarah on the platform, pliga, which is broken. Armale Rabbi Yehuda Ula Vaha Ki Asa Ula. So when Ula came, Yosef Abisma Pegima. There was this broken platform for Avodah Zarah. Armali Rabbi Yehuda Ula. Okay, so let's get the words right here. Rabbi Yehuda said to Ula, "B'hal Rabbi Shmuel Demer Tavayu b'moy shenifgam." When it comes to a pegima was a broken platform. It's also now filam adiyam in oivdin l'shivarim. Even according to the Madiyam, says that we don't use and worship things which are broken. Hanimili avodas kachavim dezilu be'milsa lemiflach l'shvarim. Maybe that's referring to avodas kachavim, in which it's a disgrace to bow down to such broken items. So this is not something which is okay. So the question is, how is it that Ula was Yosef Bimsa? How was he able to sit on this thing? Seemingly he's getting hana from sitting down. So Malay man yoiv one mi'afred Rabbi Shmuel, who gave us from the ashes of Rabbi Shmuel, umalinin inayin, and filled up our eyes. However, bimus shenifgam mutter. So yeah, it doesn't mean necessarily that everyone holds like this, but there's certainly shittas that allow you to be able to sit down on this platform because it was broken. And even if you hold that that a person actually will use things which are broken, so then how could you use and sit down on this platform which is broken? Because when it comes to an idol, even though it's broken, but since it was once worshipped, you don't want to be mavatal. Here, it's not really worth that much anyway, and therefore it's you could sit on it. Bimois shenifgam, when it comes to a platform of Avodah Zarah that was broken, mutter. Mizbech shenifgam, however, the altar aser ad shenitzatz rubo, until the majority of it's smashed. So how do we define the difference between a platform and an altar? So Rav Yaakov bar Idi Rav Yochanan bimois evanachas. The platform is just one stone. Mizbech avanim harbe is made of numerous stones. Okay, as we continue to Nun Daled Aleph, so Omer Chizkiah Mikra. What pasuk shows that this is the difference between a mizbech, which has many stones, as opposed to this platform as one? Because the pasuk says in Yeshaya, "L'chein b'zayis yichupar avoin Yaakov v'zeh kol pri chasir chatasai," and then it says "Basumoi kol avnei mizbech," and it says avnei mizbech, the stones, which means clearly mizbech has more than one. It's ka'avnei gir minu pach sois, which is ground down like chalk, these stones. Lo yakumu asherim v'chamonin, that it will not get up these the asherim or the sun. So iika ka'avnei gir minay fetzais lo yakumun asherim v'chamonim, that if it were that there were these stones, then there would be no sacrifice. Ilav yakumu, otherwise it would get up. Anyway, the point from all this is to demonstrate from the pasuk that when it comes to mizbech, it is multiple stones. Okay, and lo yakumu, Rashi says shuv lo yakrivu alav. Tana neved, when it comes to an animal that was worshipped, in which is aser ligvaya, so shelo aser v'shel chaveru mutter. When it comes to your own animal, so it's aser. However, if it belongs to someone else, so the fact that you did designated it, let's say, or worshipped it, so you don't have the ability to aser it, and therefore it's still mutter for a carbon. Says Rashi, why? Because im shelo haya kishtachavolai aser, since like you bowed down to its aser. Otherwise, it's not aser. Reminhi ezu nevid kol she'oivdin oisai, anyone who worships this animal, bin b'shay, bin b'mezin, bin b'oinis, bin b'ratzain. It doesn't matter, even was b'oinis. Now, hi oinis hechidami, what's that referring to? Lav, is it not? Can go into anas behemas chaveroi, that you went and you used your friend's animal and bowed down to it. And therefore we see, even b'oinis, you're still going to aser the animal. So how could you tell me that when it comes to an animal that was used, it's only aser if it's yours, but not your friend's? We see clearly that even behemas chaver is aser. So what does it mean, oinis? It means shansuhu of the chachavim, that the chachavim forced a Jew to have to bow down to his animal. So basically, a yid was coerced by an akum to bow down, and that's what it means with oinus. It's nothing to do with another person's animal. Says Rashi, says Taisus, perish ansuhu she'amru l'hargai imlo yishtachav melhav. They basically gave him an ultimatum and said, if you don't bow down to this idol or this animal, then we're going to kill you. So Maskar Rav Zarah, Oinis Rachmana Patre. The Torah says that if you did something b'oinis, it's beyond your control, and therefore it's not your fault. Just like the naira who is violated, so she doesn't get punished. So too, we should say that the animal should not be usher. The truth is, everything is under the category of lo sa'avdem, which the whole pasuk Rashi says lo tishtach lehem, don't bow down to them, lo savdem, don't worship them, ki anoicha shemakecha kilkana poikid avan avos, etc. Ukeshe parit locha kasev v'chai behem. Now the pasuk does also say v'chai behem. It says v'shmartem eskul koisev es mishpotai, and it says v'chai behem ani Hashem. Pasuk in Sefer Vayikra. So really, you could even violate certain averas because Hashem wants us to live. Not to die. But Yatsa Oinis, which obviously comes to exclude an Oinis, that you shouldn't be punished. Apparently you're never allowed to cause a chil Hashem. There's a feel b'oinis, which means even b'oinis you can't. So haketzad. So are you allowed to do an avera, which is b'oinis, beyond your control? You're being forced or not? So your answer depends. Habasina b'harba farhesia. So when it comes to farhesia, we say v'lo s'chal Hashem kanshi, that you're not allowed to desecrate Hashem's name, and therefore when it says oinis, that's usher, is talking about it was done before Hesia. So if the person forced you before Hesia to worship this animal, so then you can usher it. However, Besina, we apply the concept of Lenaru Sasa Damar and B'chai Behem, and therefore this person is not going to be held accountable, and therefore it would be mutter. So Amrulei Rabbanan Lo Rabba Tani the Messiah. I actually have a statement which will be in support of this distinction. When it came to the platforms of these idols, B'shas HaGzeira, during the time of Gezerah, says Rashi, before Hesiahu, Ba'inasu, where they wanted us to worship idols before Hesia, Alpha Pisha Gezerah Batla, even though the Gezerah is gone, Oiso Bimois Lo Batla. Those platforms are not batal because it was done before Hesia. Therefore, they remain aser. Armulhu imishum ha lo tisayin. That's not necessarily a proof. Emer Yisrael mummer havi. Maybe we're talking about Yisrael was a Yisrael mummer upachal baratzon. So who says that we're talking about it was be'oinis and it was before Hesia, and therefore that's why it's aser? Maybe it's talking about it was done baratzon, and that's why it's aser. Rav Ashi Emer lo tema amor el vadi Yisrael mummer havi. Don't say, well, maybe. Actually, that is the situation. Itaka was a mummer upachal baratzon. And it was actually, he was poilich baratzon. So that's the reason why, maybe it's only because it was done baratzon. And that's the reason why we say the din is, just give me a second. That's the reason why we say when it comes to, again, these platforms, why they're usher, it was because it was done baratzon. But maybe it's not a raya if it was done ba'onis, before Hesia. Okay. So again, it's vada Yisrael momer havi poyel baratzon. Let's look in Rashi. So achri shirayes Yisrael Yodam Mata, I can't read this word. But once it was seen that the Jews were in trouble, they actually started worshiping idols. Chizki will say that it was an oinus, the katani she'onos behemus chaveroi, that actually it was your friend's animals. So kegoyin shenisach lavodas kachavim yayin al karneha. So even though it's true you shouldn't be able to aser your friend's animals, however, if you did a maisa by like putting oil or something, in case wine, between the horns of the animal, then you have the ability to aser it. So you can't aser your friend's animal, but in this situation you could, because you did something, you did a maisa. So Maskavu Rav Adabarava, Hi Nevid, who, this is, what do you mean it's a case of Nevid, that like you did some action, you worshipped, Hi Bimus Ba'almahu, Vishare. You're not worshiping the animal itself, it's like a platform for a different Avodah Zarah, but the animal doesn't become usher, as it's not making the animal as an idol. El Oimer Rav Adabarava Kagain Shanisach Yayin Ben Karneha de Ovad, that you actually did it to make the animal into an idol itself. The Ovad Ba Maisa. The Chiha the Asa Ula Oimer Rabbi Yochanan Avabi Sha'amru Hamishtachava Behemus Chaver Asra. Even though it's true you shouldn't be able to ask your friend's animal, however, Asa Ba Maisa Asra. Since you did an action and now you made the animal into a Avodah Zarah, then you can aser it. Armuhu Rav Nachman Puku go out v'armule lu'ula kvar tirguma Rav Huna. Rav Huna already gave an interpretation l'shematech. Bebavel Diyam Rav Huna Haisa behemus chavera ravutza b'bnei avodas chachavim. Let's say you have an animal that's crouching down in front of an idol. Kivan sheshachet bas siman echad. Once you did one maisa of shechting even one of the simanim, the esophagus, trachea, the cut of the veshet, but you did it for the sake of Avodah Zarah, then asra, because you did a maisa. So menolan the asra ilema mekohanim. Maybe we're not from the kohanim. What does that mean? It says Rashi, she onsim malchi Yisrael lasos kaimrim, that they were forced to be like these priests for Avodah Zarah. The ksiv, and it says yigshu kahingli. These kohanim became aser to work in the Beis HaMikdash anymore once they became these priests. So maybe we can learn from the kohanim that since they did an action of a dilma shani kohanim debnei deadin, which we said this far before, to be machal between maybe a kohen and the kalim, because we canast the kalim by Chenyai, who built a mizbeach in Mitzrayim, and the question was for Avodah Zarah. Even if it wasn't for Avodah Zarah, we still canast that the Kohanim can't use the Beis HaMikdash, and the reason was because it was a canast because they didn't have to do it. They had das. The kasha was by Kalim. So it's the same thing over here, that maybe it's only by Kohanim, that because they decided, or again, they're forced, but they could have said no, but not like an animal that has no das. So maybe the animal will not become aser. The Ela mi'avdi mizbeach. Maybe we went out from the stones of the mizbeach. The Rabbanan made these stones aser in the time of the Chashmonaim. So Rashi says, "She gonzu malchi beis Chashmonaim mishum deshiksum malchi yavan leves chachavim." Since the Greeks used them for idol worship, so therefore they aser these stones. Now, v'yafa gav de hektish havi v'lo yochol av havi chachamim asran. Again, it's hektish. So the truth is, they don't have the real ability to answer it. If you'll haki kivan de oven ma'isa asrin rabbanon. Since an action was done, so therefore they answered it. So therefore we can see, even though like stones are not b'nei deah, doesn't make a difference. So that it still has it's the same thing, and therefore that's the raya. We went out from the Avdi Mizbeach, that just like the Rabbanan made these stones aser, so too when it comes to this animal. Vidilma kid rapapa. So maybe it's like rapapa. Who was that? Diamer kra ashchu v'darshu shatzul chulin. Let it go out to chulin. V'kanu abad chachavim v'yachol asran. They were kind of them, the akum, and did Avodah Zarah with them. Okay, so again, maybe they actually did Avodah Zarah with them. So maybe we make a distinction. Ve'lo mikalim. Rather, we can learn from kalim. D'chsiv v'eskola kalim asher hazniach hamelch achaz b'malchusai. So as we mentioned before, that Achaz was using these kalim. Says Rashi, shel beis hamikdash shez nichim achaz. And so this king used these kalim for avodah zarah. It's called kalim asher hazniach hamelech achas b'malchusay b'malo hechenu v'ikdishanu. If you omer mar, what we learned this before, that what is the drasha? So hechenu she ganzum, that we basically locked them up and we had to bury them because you can't use these kalim anymore. That we had to use other kalim instead. Now, these are just kalim. They don't have das, and he has no ability to really aser something, which belongs to the mikdash. Since Achaz used it for avodah zarah, asra. So that's actually going to be the raya. Question 13. Madua asur Chizkiah v'siato es kli hamikdash? Why did Chizkiah aser these kalim that Achaz used? After all, a person can't aser something which is not his. The answer is because since he did a maisa with it, he can aser it. So too, when it comes to the animal, if let's say you put wine between its horns, even though it's not yours, so you're able to aser something even though it's not yours. So therefore, that's the same idea. Okay. Good. Let's keep on going. So first, somewhat wide line. Just as we said, a person can. There's an issue with the idols on the mountains, but the mountains can't become a avodah zarah. So earth can't become like an avodah zarah, but chafer ba bayashich and midas aser. But if let's say you dug holes and pits for the sake of idols, then it will be, you could aser it as well. So you could, by doing a maisa, even though technically it shouldn't aser, it will aser. Kiyosa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda and Rav Yochanan afal bishamer hamishtach v'balei chayim lo. As we said, if you bow down to animals, you can't aser it. Also, chalipin, if you do a barter with them, l'avodas kachavim asra. So it says Rashi, hechlifim b'avodas kachavim shahaislu avodas kachavim v'chlifa. It was an idol worshipped animal, and you exchanged it, let's say for money. Let's say your animal for their animal, so then they both become aser. So Kiyasa Rabbi Omer Pliguba Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosef Rabbanan Chada Omer Chalipin Asuran Chalipa Chalipin Mutarin. Maybe only the first exchange would be aser. However, if you exchange it a second time over, that far we're not going to go. The Chadar no, feel Khalifa Nami Asuran. So my time Khalifa Asuran that it just can, it's always going to be aser because Omer Kra, the pasuk says V'hayisachem Kemohu, that it'll be a cherem just like it. So just like it is a problem, so to any of its offshoots as well. Kol shata milhayom mimenu harihu Kemohu, it'll always be the same. There'll always be aser, even the Khalifa. V'idach Omer Kra who v'lo Khalifi Khalifin. Only it, but not its exchange of exchanges. V'idach tahuma boile. V'idach. What will the other sheet do? It says who, which is mashma only it, nothing else. So huma boile muti arlo v'klai kerem. It's come to exclude the dinim of arlo, the first 3 years of the use of a tree, and the klai kerem, the vineyard and its forbidden mixtures, that we say it's only when it comes to the dinim of avodah zarah, not when it comes to the exchanges of arl or klei kerem, that if you would sell it and then you would be mekadesh with its money, it would tackle be mikudashes. It would work. Says Rashi, "Avol arla he asura b'chol makom shehi." It's asur everywhere. Avol demeha eno tefeses asran. The money will not be typhus onto it to aser. The imarchan v'kiddush b'demehim b'kadeshes. So it's a good kiddushin. D'lo mitzvah say b'isur b'maynahu, because it doesn't attach itself to it. Afal gav, says Rashi, ihu aser isnahi minayu. They can't get hana from these things themselves. Niu hahi hana matila ali arla. Avol ihi, when it comes to the woman, lom arla ka matile. The dafki kedusha isha. So it's an interesting, we allow the kedushin to be chal, but midrabanan they say you still can't get any hana from it afterwards. And it's also more in sukkah that these are two things in which even if you would exchange them it continues on. Avodas kachavim had amron. We already established that. Shvius tichsev ki yovel he kodesh tilachem. Ma kodesh, just like when it comes to the sanctity of the produce of Shvius, Taifas says dam avi aser. So even if you would exchange it, would become aser av Shvius. So just like kodesh, that's the din. That's how it works. Av Shvius Taifas is dam avi asura. If that's the case, ma kodesh Taifas is dam avi atzulchulin. Av Shvius Taifas is dam avi atzulchulin. So when it comes to hektish, there is normally an exchange that the kedusha will go on to the money, but the first item, its kedusha is gone. So so therefore, the original item remains, and also its money also has it takes upon itself the kedusha. Haketzad, welcome prepare shvius basar el masab and shvius. They both take upon themselves this sanctity. However, it's only the first time, but not the second time afterwards. Then the exchange works. The original thing remains, and then the next thing is going to remain, also be like it itself, unless there's an exchange afterwards. But dogim yain yotza dogim nichnas yain yain shemen yotza yain nichnas shemen haketzad achron nitpas b'shvius. The last thing has the kedusha shvius. Upri atzmo aser, and the first thing, the fruits remain aser. The yidach k'savar shein gzum going kiechan olamdin. So the question is, it's only one, maybe according to him, it's only 3, but otherwise you can still have a mamatzinu, the istrach, hu, l'matinu. Therefore, I need the word hu to make this miyut. Okay, so we did question 13, question 14. So the answer is, if let's say you dug bar shichin into it, because you did a maisa. So we already said this as well. Let's say you sh'asan chalip in lavodas kachavim, so that would be another way that it would become. That's another way that it will be aser. Okay, let's see if there's another question over here. Let's see. Okay. Question TA6, right? Hamishtacha l'bali chayim u'ostron masi bali chayim nesarin be'isra avodah zarah. So as we said, if it's exchanged, if you exchange it for something else in the other animal, so then it becomes osir. Question TB8, Hamishtacha l'bali chayim u'ostron masi bali chayim neser. Again, b'chalifa avodah zarah. Pretty simple question, and I gave a very simple answer. That's TB8. Okay. All right. Let's keep on going. Very interesting mission over here. Says the Masnisan. Shaul es Zakanim Baroimi. So they asked a question to the Zakanim. If Hashem really despises and hates idols so much, so lama enu mavatla. Why doesn't Hashem just get rid of all the idols, just destroy them? So Amru Lehen, so they said, listen. So if there's something that the world can live without, so they could be mavatal. So the problem is that people worship things that we need. We need the sun, the moon, the constellations, the stars, all these things. So Hashem should destroy all those things because of these shaitim, and then the world's not going to function. So it's okay, that's a good point. So maybe Hashem should keep the sun and the moon because we need them, but all the worthless things, which are idols, Hashem could destroy them. So you say you can't do that either. Because if someone worships the sun, it's going to say, "Oh, you see how powerful this God is, the sun," because obviously, what happens? So I'll show you that the sun is a god. Because it wasn't destroyed. So all the other idols were destroyed, but this one remained. It must be this one's powerful. So therefore, Hashem can't destroy any of them. Says the Gemara, Tanaban, Shalu Pelusufin es Zakanim. So the philosophers, who were, Rashi says, the Chachmi Ha'umos, they asked the elders, Baraimi, Im Elohechem If Hashem hates idols, doesn't like the worship of idols, and doesn't like idols themselves, why is it destroyed? So him, as we saw in the Mishnah. Same question. Maybe you couldn't be mavatal, but so, but they worship the sun and the moon, all these things. So yavdu oyim ne'ashaitim. So ella oilam kimin hagu noyig. The truth is that the world is in motion. Hashem doesn't step in to change nature. The shaitim shekilkulu, and the shaitim that make these mistakes of worshiping these things, asidin litin asadin. So Hashem is masalik himself and is like simsum. Hashem allows the space for people to be able to sin, even though obviously he doesn't want us to sin. Davar acher, another interpretation, Hari shigazal tsa shalchitim. Let's say a person steals a measure of wheat, v'holech v'zar b'karka, and he went and he planted in the ground. Dinhu shlotitzmach. It should be that it shouldn't flourish. Ela oilam kimin hagu noyeg v'hoylech v'shaitim shekilku asin litin as a din. So again, Hashem could cause, if you steal something, that you should see the immediate cause. But Hashem can't allow that, because then it really takes away from the bechira of a person. Davar acher, hari shaba al eishes chavero. You had relations with your friend's wife. So again, dinu shotasaber. She shouldn't get pregnant, because that's not a good thing, right? El oilam kimin hagu noyig. The hoylech v'shadsh shkivla asin leitin asadin. It's the same thing. Behind it, Yomi Reish Lakish, Yomer Kadosh Baruch Hu lo dayin l'rishayim. It's not enough for the wicked she'aisin sela shali pumbi, that they take this coin, says Rashi, roishim shali shani roishim boy, this like a coin or a form, aisin hefker, they make this stamp, this seal, like worthless. The chol shechol writes a lachtam by yachtam by anyone who wishes to seal can use. Kleimer shiboyin al erva al karchi moilidehen, that they will have relations improperly. Ela shematrichen oisi, they trouble me. Umach timinon oisi bali karchi, and they make improper kids that are born. So it's like matriach me, because it was a gzeira. Unfortunately, I didn't want these kids to be born, because they weren't from the marriage that were supposed to produce a child. But nonetheless, I had no choice but to allow it. And Rashi says, "Umiboyli heicha itmar d'reish lakish ve'ez mikra hu darish kabbalah zu shekadosh baruch hu kaivel al kach v'tanchuma d'reish ma'oisul pasik suryuladcha teshi." So it says that Hashem kind of weakens himself in order for people to be able to sin and for nature to continue. Shoyel peluspus echad es Rabbi Gamliel. So he asked Rabbi Gamliel a question. Kosu b'saraschem, it says in your Torah, ki Hashem akecha eish achahu, kel kana. Hashem is like this fiery fire and a jealous God. Miskana boivdeha. Why is it these jealous upon the worshippers, ve'ein miskana ba, but not on the Avodah Zarah itself? Because why is he mad at the worshippers, but not the idols, the Avodah Zarah itself? So he had a kid. He was raising a dog. And he basically gave the dog the king's name. Kashu Nishma, when he swore, Omer B'chai Kelev, he would say in the name of the dog, which was the same as Abba. Kishishama HaMelech, so when the king heard about this, Almihu Kayas, who's he going to be angry at? Is he going to be angry at the dog, or is he going to be angry at his son? Al Benu Kayas, Al Hakelevu Kayas, Al Haviyarma Al Benu Kayas, because it's not the dog's fault, it was the person's fault. So too, we can't get mad at an inanimate object. It's not the idol's fault, it's the person who worships' fault. Armul Kelev Atakara Kaira Oisa. Are you calling like the Avodah Zarah like a dog? V'lo yesh bo mamish. It has some substance. It's real. Mari Isa, what do you see? So I'll tell you. Pamachas nafla deleka birenu. There was a fire in our city. The nisra called Irkul. The whole city was getting burnt up. Yoisa base of what is kachavim unisraf. The one house that was spared was the house of idol worship. So alav Medina, that people were rebelling. When he was doing war, so did he do milchama with the people alive or dead? So he did it with the living. So the reality is, who's he gonna punish? He's gonna fight against the things that are alive, not this base of Avodah Zarah, which is like it's dead, right? So doesn't prove anything. So understand you're calling Avodah Zarah like a dog, like it's dead. In Cain, you have denim in oilam. Hashem should get rid of it if it's so bad, it's so worthless. Then he would mavatal. As we said, they worship all these things which are important, to the springs and the valleys. So you have the oil in there, shaitim. So Hashem's not going to destroy these things which are integral to the world. And so too, as it says on Nun Hey and Aleph, the pasuk says, "Asef Adam u behema asef oif hashamayim udigei hayom." So what is this saying? Asav kol mali pnei adam nuam Hashem. Asav adam behema asav oif hashamayim udigei hayom. V'hame chashelois as Rishayim begaimer. So v'chem nenesh Rishayim nichshal mehem. Understand, because the Rishayim are stumbling with these things, because that they eat all these things. Yavdim min oilam, they should be removed from the world. V'lo adam hein oivdin, they also worship people too, right? So v'yichrasi es adam mial pnei hadama v'gaimer. So that's how we end off. Bitmi says Rashi Shari Afal Adam Hein Oivdin. Okay, all right, we're gonna stop there. Let's possibly see another question. Maybe TB9. No, TA6. We did Adkan.